can wake your son," whispered the young nurse to the weary single dad, a tech titan whose world had crumbled. "What happened next? A miracle that will leave you breathless." Jonathan Pierce's voice broke like brittle twigs as it echoed through the desolate hospital corridor. His tailored charcoal suit, now creased and stained from countless sleepless nights, hung on his frame like a shadow of his grief. The dim lights of the pediatric ICU flickered, casting eerie shadows on the stark white walls. It was nearly midnight, but time had lost all meaning for him. His 4-year-old son Ethan lay still in a hospital bed, his small chest rising and falling only with the help of machines. 3 months ago, a reckless driver stole Jonathan's wife and left Ethan in a coma. Since that tragedy, Jonathan, once the unshakable CEO of a billion-dollar tech empire, had become a ghostly fixture in room 317, hollow-eyed, unraveling thread by thread. Tonight, like every other night, he sat by Ethan's side, head bowed, clutching a tiny stuffed lion, his son's favorite. His eyes burned not from tears, for he'd long exhausted those, but from the relentless weight of exhaustion and despair. Soft footsteps approached. "Mr. Pierce," a gentle voice cut through the silence. He didn't turn. "I said no more." "Updates," he muttered, his voice rough as sandpaper. "I'm not here for an update." The voice replied, steady and warm. A hand, confident yet kind, touched his shoulder. "I believe I can wake your son." Jonathan's head shot up. He turned to see a young woman, her hospital ID, reading Clara Evans, RN. Her auburn hair was neatly tied back, though a few strands framed her face. Her hazel eyes sparkled with conviction, not arrogance or pity. She couldn't have been older than 25. "What did you say?" he whispered. "I believe I can wake your son," Clara repeated, her voice unwavering, like a beacon in the dark. Jonathan blinked, his jaw tight. "With all due respect, Nurse Evans, I've spoken to every specialist in this hospital. They say Ethan's brain activity is barely there. They told me to prepare for a decision. What can you do that they can't?" Clara knelt to his level, her gaze soft but resolute. "I know how that sounds, Mr. Pierce. I'm not offering false hope. I've been working on a Methadone emotional engagement protocol. It uses consistent stimulation, memory cues, and sensory triggers to reach beyond the clinical, to touch something deeper." Jonathan stared, his voice sharp. "You want to talk to my son? He hasn't moved in 3 months." "I'm not just going to talk," Clara said firmly. "I'm going to communicate. There's a difference." He leaned back, shaking his head. "I don't need another miracle theory. I need facts." Clara's eyes didn't waver. "I helped a boy, Liam, in a coma for 8 weeks after an accident. Everyone gave up. I didn't. I tried this method, and he woke up. The doctors couldn't explain it, but his parents saw it." He spoke his first word a week later. Jonathan glanced at Ethan, so pale, so still, untouched by the chaos his small body had endured. "That was 8 weeks. Ethan's been like this for 12. I know it's harder," Clara said, "but not impossible." He sighed, his voice heavy. "Do you have hospital approval?" "I have clearance for non-invasive therapy. Nothing harmful. I'll sit with him, talk to him, use gentle sensory triggers, music, familiar scents, even your voice, if you allow it." Jonathan hesitated. The CEO in him demanded logic, control. But then he looked at Ethan, the boy who once giggled at squirrels in their garden, who called Waffles' son squares, who hadn't felt his father's embrace in months. "What do you need from me?" he asked quietly. "Just your permission. Give me 1 week." He studied her, the steady fire in her eyes, the calm in her voice. She wasn't selling hope. She believed it. Something stirred in him, a faint spark. 1 week, he said finally. "If I see even a hint you're making things worse, it stops." Clara nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Pierce. I won't let you down." She turned to Ethan, gently brushing a lock of hair from his forehead, and whispered something only he could hear. For the first time in weeks, Jonathan stayed to listen. Clara began Ethan's treatment with her own method. Emotive, memory, immersion, EMI, born from caring for her comatose father and her research into how emotional memory can spark brain recovery. Each day, she spent 6 uninterrupted hours with Ethan, not just present, but actively weaving a world to awaken his dormant memories. She played sounds from his past. Jonathan's voice reading bedtime stories, the sizzle of waffles on Sunday mornings, the lullabies his mother once sang. These weren't random. They were fragments of Ethan's life, timed to mirror his old routines. She filled the room with scents: warm maple syrup, lavender baby soap, the crisp smell of autumn leaves, using oils and diffusers to layer the air with memory. From old home videos, Clara learned how Ethan's mother would ruffle his hair, pat his back in gentle rhythms, hold him close when he was sleepy. Clara mirrored those gestures precisely, as if her hands could speak what words couldn't. Even the lighting played a role: golden for cozy stories, soft green for park adventures, pale purple for bedtime. The room became a living storybook, a world Ethan could feel. Each day followed a script, recreating Ethan's life. Clara greeted him like his mother did, described lunches with Dad on the porch, narrated imaginary walks to the park with his toy lion on a pretend leash. At night, she bathed him in words, dressed him in memories, and read his favorite lion book, ending with a song she barely recalled, learning. At the end of each session, she placed one hand over Ethan's heart, the other over her own, breathing slowly in sync, a heart sync. She called it. No machines, no monitors, just a shared human rhythm, a quiet conversation between souls. She wasn't just reminding Ethan of life, she was inviting him back to it. Jonathan watched. From behind the glass, a man who once shaped industries with a single call, now powerless. No fortune could buy his son's laughter. Yet here was Clara, this auburn-haired nurse, daring to promise what no doctor could. His skepticism softened into quiet awe. He began bringing her coffee, then snacks, then a warm scarf. When he noticed her staying late, his gesture spoke what he couldn't. I see you. I trust you. One night, as Clara sang under the soft golden glow of memory lights, Jonathan watched, his heart heavy. The light reminded him of the night his wife died, her final gaze on Ethan, his whispered promise, "I'll take care of our boy." That vow was both his anchor and his burden. Then, on the 10th night, it happened. Clara finished a story about a lion racing to the stars. As she brushed Ethan's hair, she saw it, a tear glistening down his cheek. She froze. "Ethan," she whispered, cupping his face. No movement, but the tear was real, warm, human. "Jonathan, come now," she called, voice trembling. He ran in, breathless, and saw the tears trail. "My God," he whispered, collapsing beside the bed. "Do you think he felt the story?" Clara asked, voice breaking. "I don't know," Jonathan replied, gripping Ethan's hand. "But I think he's trying to come back to us." From that night, Jonathan never left the room. The tears sparked whispers through the ward. Some staff found it touching, others were skeptical. "She thinks she can wake him with stories," one nurse scoffed in the break room. "It's dangerous, giving a desperate father false hope." Clara heard the whispers, felt the isolation, but pressed on. Jonathan overheard one such conversation at the nurses' station. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice icy. The nurses paled. "No, Mr. Pierce," one stammered. "Then perhaps you could focus on something more useful than mocking someone doing more for my son than anyone here has in months." Later, Clara found a single pink rose on her workstation. A note beneath it, in Jonathan's neat script. "Don't let their noise drown out what your heart knows." A quiet bond grew. They spoke outside Ethan's room, small talk at first, then deeper. One evening, by the hospital's city view window, Clara shared her story. "My father had a stroke when I was 19, she said softly. "They said he'd never wake up. I read to him, sang to him, even when it felt pointless. 2 years later, he opened his eyes. He said my name." Jonathan watched her, pain and pride in her eyes. "That's why you believe in Ethan," he said quietly. "It's not blind hope," she nodded. "It's memory, it's love." The next night, Jonathan sought Clara after her shift, holding Ethan's favorite train book. She wasn't at her desk or in the break room. A quiet instinct led him to the hospital chapel, its stained glass glowing softly. There, in the last pew, Clara sat, head bowed, tears streaming. He paused, then slipped off his jacket, draped it over her shoulders, and tucked a note into her hand before leaving. When she opened it, her breath caught. "You're not alone in this, Jonathan," she wept, not from loneliness, but from belonging. The first sign was subtle. Clara was humming "You Are My Sunshine" while adjusting Ethan's blanket when his left hand twitched a deliberate flex of fingers. Her heart raced. "Ethan, sweetheart, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered, a faint brush of movement. She ran for Jonathan. He rushed in, eyes wide, and saw it, the flicker beneath Ethan's lids. Neither spoke. Then Jonathan exhaled, a sound between a gasp and a sob. "He's in there," he whispered. "He's really in there." Doctors ran tests, their results inconclusive. But for Clara and Jonathan, it was a miracle unfolding. Cautious hope bloomed. 2 days later, Jonathan found Clara after her shift. "I was thinking," he said, nervous, "maybe we could get dinner somewhere outside this hospital, just to breathe." Clara hesitated, then smiled. "As friends, two people who share something big, and maybe," he added, "who need to remember what normal feels like, even for one night." That Friday, Clara stepped out in a simple emerald dress, her auburn hair softly curled. Jonathan stared, caught off guard. "You're staring," she teased. "I know," he said, smiling. "I wasn't prepared." At a cozy French bistro, their conversation flowed light, then deep. "I used to think family came after success," Jonathan said, swirling his wine. "Then everything fell apart, and I saw I had it wrong. Family isn't a prize, it's the reason." Clara nodded. "I thought wanting a family was selfish after my dad. But now, maybe love is meant to be shared, not saved." Their eyes met, the hospital's wait fading for a moment. Then Clara's phone buzzed at the nurse's station. "They know I'm off," she said, puzzled, then answered. Her face shifted to shock. "Say that again." Asterisk, she put it on speaker. "Clara." Ethan spoke one word, clear as day. "What did he say?" she asked, voice trembling. "Dad," the nurse said. "He said Dad." Jonathan's glass clinked against the table. "He said my name," he whispered. Clara nodded, eyes shining. "Your name." In that candlelit bistro, amid wine and shared pain, the impossible began. Ethan had spoken, and Jonathan smiled not as a CEO, but as a father whose world was stirring back to life. The hospital room was quiet, save for the steady beeps and hums. Jonathan sat by Ethan, holding his hand and a small toy train. Across the room, Clara stood, heart racing with anticipation. It had been 2 days since Ethan's first word, "Dad." The doctors called it a reflex, but Clara and Jonathan believed. Otherwise, that morning, the air felt alive, electric. Clara leaned in, brushing Ethan's hair. "Ethan, sweetheart," she whispered, "if you can hear me, it's okay to open your eyes. We're here, your dad's here, I'm here." And then it happened. Ethan's eyelids fluttered, then parted, revealing his eyes, blinking against the soft light. Jonathan froze. "Ethan," he whispered, voice breaking. Ethan turned slightly, toward the sound. "Daddy," he croaked, faint but clear. Jonathan collapsed beside the bed, sobbing, cradling Ethan's hand. "I'm here, buddy, I've got you." Ethan's gaze drifted to Clara, his lips curving into a tiny smile. "Star," he whispered. Clara gasped, hands to her mouth. "Did he just—" Jonathan turned, tears streaming. "He called you his star." Tears fell as Clara knelt, brushing Ethan's cheek. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, voice shaking. "You remembered me." Ethan's small arm reached for her, trembling, wrapping around her neck in a fragile hug. The room transformed as nurses rushed in, followed by a doctor. Monitors beeped, vitals were checked, but no one could explain it. "He shouldn't be this responsive so soon," one doctor murmured. "Spontaneous recovery." Jonathan and Clara knew better. This wasn't just science, it was love, patience, lullabies in the dark, stories to shadows. It was a miracle born of unwavering faith. Clara stayed by Ethan, his small body leaning toward her with childlike trust. Jonathan kissed Ethan's forehead, then looked at Clara. "You did this," he said, voice raw. "You brought him back." "No," she whispered. "He came back because you never gave up." But Jonathan shook his head. "I wouldn't have made it without you." Ethan sighed, closing his eyes not in a coma, but in safe, restful sleep. In that moment, surrounded by machines that no longer mattered, a boy, a father, and a nurse became more than survivors. They became family. The garden behind Jonathan's brownstone glowed with fairy lights, framed by blooming roses and soft jasmine. The spring air carried warmth, and the setting hummed with quiet celebration. Clara stepped through the gate in a soft peach dress, holding a small gift. She expected a simple dinner, but the sight of a table under golden lights and Ethan in a paper crown stole her breath. "You made it," Jonathan said, smiling as he approached. "You said simple dinner," Clara teased, her voice unsteady. "This looks like a fairy tale," he chuckled. "Blame a certain 5-year-old with big ideas about streamers and cookies." They ate on the patio, laughing as Ethan smeared icing on his face. Soft jazz played Della Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole rapping them in nostalgia. After dessert, Jonathan returned with a box wrapped in navy paper. "For you," he said, handing it to Clara. Surprised, she opened it, a leather-bound album embossed with "For the Star Who Stayed." Inside were photos of the past months, Clara holding Ethan's hand, reading animatedly, tucking in his blanket with tender care. Every moment she thought unseen was captured. "You were watching," she whispered, voice trembling. "Not creepily," Jonathan said quickly. "I just didn't want to forget what hope looked like. I saw it in you every day." Clara flipped through, tears welling. Each photo held the hardest, yet most beautiful, chapter of her life. The last page bore a note. "You didn't just wake my son, you woke something in me I thought I'd lost." "Jonathan," she whispered, looking up. He took her hands. "I was angry at the world, at God, at myself. I thought love died with my wife. I thought all I had was work and silence and a boy I might never hold again." Clara shook her head, lips trembling. "You never gave up." "I did," he admitted. "But you didn't. You changed everything with your stubborn hope, your voice, your heart." The lights twinkled as Ethan slept in a hammock, his toy lion beside him. Jonathan brushed a strand of Clara's hair back, his hand lingering. "Can I?" he asked softly. She nodded. Under the golden lights, he kissed her, slow, certain, filled with unspoken truths. "Took you long enough." She smiled through tears. He laughed, pulling her close. "You're not going anywhere, right?" "No," she whispered, resting against his chest. "I'm exactly where I belong." The garden transformed over the year. New blooms, delicate lights, and soft music filled the air. Rows of white chairs faced an arch draped in ivy, and pale pink roses, the color Clara wore the day Ethan spoke again. Beneath it stood Clara, radiant in a flowing ivory gown, her auburn hair glowing in the golden hour. Jonathan, in a soft navy suit, held her hand, his other on Ethan's shoulder. His gaze never left her, a man who'd seen life's rawest truths and found something precious. Ethan, now 5, beamed, clutching a satin pillow with 2 rings tied in gold ribbon. Every step, every word, was a testament to their survival. Their vows were simple, raw, spoken through tears and smiles. When the final "I do" rang out, cheers erupted like sunlight through clouds. Then Ethan, with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster, spun and tossed a bouquet of pink daisies over his shoulder. Laughter exploded as guests scrambled, some nearly toppling chairs. Jonathan scooped Ethan up, laughing, while Clara watched, tears in her eyes. They weren't just a wedding party, they were a living miracle. As twilight fell, the family stepped to a quiet corner, each holding a balloon, red, white, sky blue. "Tell me again what they say," Ethan said, solemnly. Jonathan knelt. "Mine says hope, Mummy's says love, yours says miracle." "Because that's what I am," Ethan whispered, gripping his string. "Yes, you are," Clara said, kissing his head. "On 3, Jonathan said. Ethan counted. 1, 2, 3. They released the balloons, watching them rise into the dusky sky until they were specks among the stars. Silence followed, a sacred, awe-filled silence. That night, Clara found a crayon drawing on the fridge. Jonathan with strong arms, Clara in a bright pink dress, Ethan in the middle, holding their hands above, in wobbly letters, "Home." Her heart swelled. They weren't just survivors, they were family. Narration, warm and reflective, in Jonathan's voice. "I thought I had it, all an empire, deals closed with a call, but none of it mattered beside my son's bed, praying for a sign." Images flicker, Jonathan pacing, Clara reading, Ethan's eyes opening. "I thought strength was never breaking, but real strength is breaking and still choosing love." Pause, then softer. "Sometimes, a stranger's kindness brings you back to life. Someone who sings to silence, reads to shadows, and believes in the impossible." The scene shifts to their living room, warmly lit. Clara cradles Ethan, asleep with his lion. Jonathan enters, smiling, draping a blanket over them, his fingers brushing Clara's shoulder, Ethan's hair. He sits, watching with quiet gratitude. "Life has no guarantees," his voice continues. "Losses will steal your breath, but if you're lucky, you'll meet someone who teaches you to breathe again." The final shot zooms out, their home glowing, the night peaceful. A crayon phrase appears. "Love brought me back." Screen fades to black dot. If this story stirred your soul, sparked hope, or reminded you of love's power, subscribe to Kindness Power. We honor resilience, compassion, and the quiet heroes who change lives, one act at a time. Hit the bell to never miss a tale that might heal your heart. Thank you for watching.